Well, countries throw away millions, billions of tons of plastic waste every year. Now, the issue is, how do we manage that waste? And if these bigger nations, more developed nations, are struggling, what is the impact of plastic on small island developing states such as Trinidad and Tobago? Well, this morning, to speak precisely about that, I'm joined by Dr. Sherwyn Millette. He's a sustainability consultant at Costaatt. He's with us via Zoom. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you guys today?
We're doing well. How are you doing, sir?
It's a morning and we're going as usual.
That's good, and thank you very much for joining me. Start the conversation by that particular point. How would you suggest, or how would we even begin to rate how small island developing states such as Trinidad and Tobago manage their plastic waste?
First up, small island developing states tend to have some challenges in terms of waste management, right? Just based on the size and the fact that we import almost everything that we use. So as we develop, some of the products that we use become difficult to manage because you can't just throw them into a landfill, right? Because they do damage the environment, they poison the environment, and that has negative impacts on human health. Plastic specifically is a little bit challenging in that we can't manage what we can't measure. And we have a hard time measuring exactly how much plastic ends up in our environment. Trinidad and Tobago imports maybe 130,000 metric tons of plastic in any given year, based on some of the research that we've done since 2016. And the challenge isn't not necessarily just the direct plastics in terms of the bottles and the plastic products and so on. A lot of the plastic that we deal with is indirect. It's hidden plastics, such as packaging, the wrapping around the products that protect our products, all of those types of things. And then you have hybrid types of plastic, which is a mix of different types of plastic, which makes it even further more difficult to recycle and reuse.
In that particular sense, that lack of data or lack of statistics that you've spoken of, that has proven a challenge in regard to your study, but also has that proven a challenging point in us trying to find solutions in managing the situation?
Yes. Let me kind of back up to something called a linear economy. Right? That is take, make, waste. So it's a straightforward thing. It was established during the Industrial Revolution, and that is the basis of a lot of our economies today. Recycling takes it one step further, where we say, okay, you know what? Let's not throw everything away. Some things still have value and some things still have use to us. So we try to bring it back and we recycle and reuse it as much as possible. Now, with plastics, there's a limit to how much we can reuse plastics. We can reuse plastics maybe 7 times, 9 times, something like that. All right, so that in itself becomes a challenge. So what do we do with that once we are finished with it, once we can't recycle it anymore? And that is where we need to now start to move on to something called the circular economy, where we are looking for ways to keep the product in use for as long as possible, keep the materials in use for as long as possible, and then finally recycle. And then when we are ready to dispose of it, how do we then either create a nutrient for the environment or convert to energy for use? And that way we minimize the impact on the environment.
Before we even... sorry, Dr. Millette, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, before we even get to the circular economy, if we were to speak about recycling, does Trinidad and Tobago even have credible recycling operations?
It depends on the material. We recycle bottles. That's roughly about 3% of the bottles are recycled. We recycle paper, cardboard. That's, again, roughly 3%. Unfortunately, with the plastics, we are recycling less than 1% of the plastics locally, right? Much of the recycling that we do is actually collection and export, right? We don't tend to do a lot of recycling locally, especially with the plastics.
Is there an opportunity, though, economically? I know recently we've heard of one private company who's actually earning foreign exchange from recycling plastics. Is there an opportunity then for the great economy to benefit from recycling?
Yes, we can. The environment itself will benefit, of course. The challenge is making the economic case for recycling, because you tend to need to have certain quantities in order to make it economically viable. So the question is whether or not we are able to do so locally. I want to say yes with the plastic, but the challenge becomes collecting it, cleaning it, sorting it, so that it can then be recycled, because you can't have different colors, different grades, all mixed into one kind of thing. I mean, you have to remove the packaging. So for example, with the bottles that you use, there are two types of plastic in it, just off the top of your head, unless of course the plastic, well, let me not jump there yet. But so for example, you may have PET for the bottle itself, and the caps that you have on the bottles are a harder type of plastic, such as HDPE or something like that. Right? So you have to create a mechanism to sort. So recycling in Trinidad and Tobago, I would say, is very much in its infancy still. And we have quite a way to go in order to kind of really have a system in place that handles the plastic problem to the extent that it needs to be handled.
Is it feasible for a small island developing state such as Trinidad and Tobago to utilize a practice that we see abroad? For example, in England, you have special bins that you utilize for certain kinds of waste and are collected on certain days. That is just one step in a bigger process. But is it also feasible for TNT to develop such an idea?
I want to say yes. I think that it is feasible. It is a cultural shift in thinking. We can't just throw things out of a window as we feel. I mean, just this morning, somebody just threw something out of a window as they pass by, and we have to make a special effort. And I don't think it's that we are incapable of doing it. Many of our citizens, when they go abroad, fall in line and they do what is required under those laws. But what we need is an infrastructure. So do we have laws to support that? Do we have laws that allow for people to do these things? Is it convenient? Is it open to them? Can they do this easily? Right? And all of those are things that make components to it. There's a cost to this. Who is going to bear the cost? Mm-hmm. How is it going to be collected? Are we going to say, okay, so you say maybe who is going to collect it? Is it the regional corporations? Is it swim call? Who collects this garbage, cleans it, processes it, and then manages it afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Now, I know earlier you mentioned even the plastic wrapping on imported products, even local products, to try and protect the product. But as we're seeing globally, there's at least a trying to shift away from the use of plastics that are harmful to the environment with more environmentally eco-friendly products. Is there something such as environmentally friendly plastic?
In development, you have recyclable plastics and so on and so forth. I mean, for example, I was at a conference last week, and the folks from PriceSmart were talking about their creation of compostable plastics. So it depends on the materials from which a plastic is derived and how they can handle it. So yes, the challenge, of course, is producing this in the quantities and at the cost that make it feasible for companies to switch. And of course, you have the engineering components of it to ensure that the plastic can hold up to the uses that it's designed for. Mm-hmm. So there's a possibility, and the research is ongoing.
But do you think that there's a need for now Trinidad and Tobago to actually, in this particular time, make it mandatory for more environmentally and eco-friendly products to be used in packaging? Right now, as far as I'm aware, there's no set policy which is designed to say you must use this. It must only contain this amount of plastic. Is there any guidelines in TNT that suggests that? And if that's not the case, because at least I'm not aware of it, there needs to be policies which direct us to utilizing such best practice?
You're correct. There's no policy right now. The bottling bill has been in Parliament a few times over the last 20 years. It's something that they are working at and continue to work at. The challenge with plastic, and I'm going to specifically talk about PET, for example, is that there's no residual value. And in spite of the fact that there could be value, if it is that people don't see something as being valuable, they throw it away. So if we had an infrastructure that allowed for us to say, okay, listen, there is value to this piece of material, people will find ways to use it. In terms of your policy perspective, again, that is a legislative action. So if you sit down and say 30%, 40% of your product has to be made up of recycled plastic, that is another opportunity to kind of add value to what we're doing. And if it is that, for example, we bring in finished bottles or finished products, and the law says, no, this must have a certain percentage of recycled content, then that is going to change what is available locally and in that way impact the overall country. There are different kinds of recycling. So for example, if they are doing research on something called chemical recycling, which would allow for us to bring plastics back to virgin states. Therefore, we can keep reusing the same plastic over and over again with some limits, of course. But there's a lot of research going on in that area also.
Doesn't sound necessarily too healthy, chemically recycling plastics. But yes, you were about to...
Everything has its upside and downside. And like I said, the health component of it is what is part of this research. Because right now we may embed plastics in a number of other products. The question is, and there's research going on right now about whether or not that leaches into the environment in terms of microplastics at all. But for right now, it's embedded in concrete. It's made into plastic board. It's made into it's embedded in asphalt and sidewalks and all this type of thing as a way to kind of manage some of the plastics that you use. You can even use the plastics with some technology changes as a fuel source. So, a lot of countries are looking at different ways to kind of handle their plastic waste because, like I said, they can't put it in their landfills.
Now, you mentioned as an energy source, if I'm not mistaken, based off of one study that I read, and I think you were part of, Sweden burns roughly half of its garbage annually to produce energy. And you even referenced cement. The cement plants are energy intensive. Is that also a possibility for TNT to actually burn plastic waste for energy? Is it costly? But also, is it hazardous to the environment, burning plastics for energy?
Start with your first question last. Yes, it is hazardous. So they'd have to have special technology to clean the exhausts so that this doesn't end up inside of the residential areas, have negative impacts on health. It is possible to use it and divert some of the natural gas that we do use. It will have some type of infrastructural costs. So you can use waste to energy, and I believe we had considered a waste to energy plant a few years ago. But this is established technology at this point. So there are technological solutions to some of the negative impacts that they may have. And it's not necessarily the first port of call in a circular economy to start just simply burning the waste, because that has its own set of challenges that go along with it.
And finally, Dr. Millette, how crucial is a material flow analysis, especially right now for Transvago, as we try to move forward in managing our waste situation, especially plastic waste?
Like I said at the start, you can't manage what you can't measure. And doing research is a little bit challenging in that we cannot necessarily go to one source and get all of this information. So a material flow is exceptionally important because what that does is that it quantifies the amount of waste, the sources that waste is coming from, and whether or not that waste, the amount of waste that we accumulate, can meet the threshold as feedstock for whatever process we intend to use that waste for. Many Caribbean islands, many small islands, don't have enough waste for that feedstock. And even if they did have enough, the question comes back in, like I said earlier, how do we collect that in a systemic way to make sure that that feedstock is there constantly? Because, I mean, you can't start a business, have enough product for a month, and then 3 months later, you still can't get enough to keep your operating costs down. So that is one of the challenges that businesses would have with respect to waste, using waste as an input in that respect. Because, again, the systems are not quite in place yet.
Do we even have the expertise or the resources to have a material analyst, Flo? Do we even have that expertise or to actually conduct such a study?
Yeah, I think so. I fully believe that. I mean, I was able to do that myself as part of my own dissertation work. So there are a number of tools that can be used to do this. The issue, again, becomes a matter of the data.
Well, Dr. Millette, I want to thank you very much for joining me on AM Prime this morning, discussing this situation here in TNT with respect to our waste management, especially plastic waste management. Actually, I'm very appreciative of the insights and even your study, which is available for the public to read, actually, at least a breakdown of it, where you pointed out opportunity to even burn plastic for fuel, but though it is hazardous, the technology exists. It is going to require some level of infrastructural development,
Yes.
but it is possible, even utilizing it, for example, in cement plants. So thank you very much, sir, for your time and for the information of which you've shared with us this morning.
Thank you so much. I just want to point out that, the work that you guys do, that academics do in terms of supporting industry is extremely important. And as we understand this, colleges, much like Costaatt and UTT, are all looking at solutions and working with companies to find solutions. And a lot of the larger companies are also, and the NGOs for that matter, are looking for solutions. So it's not something that is hidden. It's not something that we are not aware of. And a lot of people are actively working for solutions.
I'm very glad to hear that, sir, and I truly hope that even though we're actively looking for solutions, when such solutions come about, we actually go ahead full force with trying to implement them, at least to resolve the most crucial situations right now. But I'm very glad to hear that, sir. Thank you so much.
All right, you guys have a great day otherwise. Thank you so much for having me.
You too, sir. Take care.
Okay.
Keep well.